Cyberpunk, but people in the Underworld introduction. www.xiaosuiyuan.com Ghost Night Journey, coexisting with the mechanical frenzy. Dragons give birth to 9 offspring, transforming into 9 different viruses that spread. The internet is virtual, but it is also another reality. When the torrent of neon steel coexists with the mountains and rivers in mythology, one massive mythological legend after another is elevated to reality and presented in another way. Welcome https://www.zayashuan.com. Chapter 1 Beijing Public Network. Tianting. You are listening at novel full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, rain, continuous rain is the eternal night. The prayers worshipped day and night by the righteous gods of the heavens, along with high-frequency pulse signals, pass through thick clouds, pass through the information transmission chain of the heavenly Tao, and flow into wireless optical cables one by one. In this vast world network where billions of megabytes of information are constantly transmitted every microsecond, a small section of the information flow is mapped onto Ellie's vision, extracting her neural network and connecting it to the local public network in Beijing. Ellie's body trembled slightly as she lay in bed, her eyes flickering with white light. In her vision, the pure white ceiling was twisted and turned into 2D printed paper in the afterglow. Welcome to the Beijing Public Network. Tianting opening her eyes, Ellie was immersed in a virtual network, but because it was a neural network, the virtual network was almost identical to reality. Unlike the high-tech and heavily polluted world outside, public network. Heavenly Court is rendered by the Nuwa engine, shrouded in fairy-like aura, with small red buildings floating above clouds. Pedestrians walk on clouds. Whether it's making friends, trading, or dating, disregarding the distance spanning millions of kilometers in reality, these things can all be accomplished through public networks. For those who are addicted to the virtual world, this is reality. Begging for a son with a heavy sum of money, coordinates 3257, lost fertility due to accident. Second-hand mechanical prosthetics for sale, coordinates 1239, discounted price, fair to all, 10 years. Ellie lightly tapped her earlobes twice, blocking out the noise from the public channel, and found the coordinates to come to a floating vermilion small building. A small translucent chessboard appeared before her eyes. Fingers lightly tapped on the chessboard, deciphering the game above, and the clouds under Ellie's feet rode her to the door of the vermilion red building. Pushing the door open, there was only a simple wooden table and 2 wooden chairs inside. On the wooden table, a pair of tea utensils filled the air with the aroma of tea, refreshing the heart and soul. On one of the wooden chairs, there sat a man dressed in cloth. This man has an extremely ordinary appearance, the kind that cannot be found in a pile of people. Ellie pulled the chair and sat down opposite the man, then asked, "I'm on vacation. What can I do for you?" The man across from him took out a vermilion wooden plaque and placed it on the table, pushing it in front of Ellie. This wooden plaque is exquisitely crafted with dragon and tiger patterns on both sides, and the front is engraved with the 3 characters, Dali Temple, in small seal script. The man said, "Have you heard about yesterday? A gang called the Bamboo Forest Association in Chang'an City used hacking technology to engrave the time and location of the robbery on the bulletin board of Dali Temple." Ellie frowned and said, "Are you so arrogant? You came to me for this reason." The man said, "You are the most capable person in Dali Temple, and the authorities have decided to let you investigate this case. It is said that this is the consistent style of the Bamboo Forest Association, but I don't know why you provoked Dali Temple this time." Ellie hugged her chest with both hands, leaned back and said calmly, "The people of Chang'an City are all trash. Shouldn't they be in charge of this matter? Dali Temple has always ignored local cases." The man chuckled and said, "This time it's different. There are people from the capital in the Bamboo Forest Club, which is very complicated to say. Moreover, they plan to rob gold on a train tonight, train number K35, from the capital to Chang'an, with 10 carriages full of gold. Ellie picked up the waist tag on the table and looked at it. Is there anything else? She asked. The man's eyes flickered with an inexplicable gleam and said, your sister has news. But you need to finish this case before I can tell you. Upon hearing her sister's news, Ellie instinctively pressed her waist tag tightly with her fingers. Then she said, I took on this case. Before disconnecting the neural network, she vaguely heard the man say, be careful, this case is not easy. Exited from the Beijing public network. Tianting. Goodbye. After a burst of white light visually, the familiar white ceiling reappeared before Ellie's eyes. Turning from the bed, one can see the beautiful and towering buildings through the window. The neon in the tall building shines in from the window, adding a touch of light to the dark room. Ellie got up and put on a black coat. She printed out the waist tag of Dali Temple from the conveyor and walked out. The majestic rain continued to sway, covering the night. Through the neon lights shining on millions of densely populated high-rise buildings, one could see these raindrops flustered and crashing onto the high-speed trains floating in the air. This train is a journey from Beijing to Chang'an, carrying 300 passengers. It has a total of 15 carriages, of which 5 are passengers and the remaining 10 are all golden. Ellie got on the train midway and went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to browse through all 5 carriages. However, she didn't find any suspicious people, so she stopped between the first and second carriages. The speed of the train is very fast, reaching 1,600 kilometers per hour. It only takes 3 hours from Beijing to Chang'an. This flight departs at 9 o'clock and when it reaches Chang'an, it happens to be exactly 12 o'clock. Ellie glanced at her watch, it's already 10:35, there's still some time left. Before 12 o'clock, she needs to find the robber lurking in the car. Robbing gold is a bit interesting. I have never seen such an arrogant robber before. From the provocation in Chang'an City to the Dali Temple in the capital city, the connections between them are complex and beyond imagination. I'm afraid I waded through muddy water this time, but these are all insurmountable difficulties to find my sister. Ellie regained her senses, grabbed the waiter pushing a small cart beside her, and then lifted a corner of her black coat to reveal the waist tag of Dali Temple hanging on her waist. She whispered, is there any suspicious person on the train, or do you think anyone is suspicious? The waiter was a girl with a bun-shaped head, looking young. She glanced at her waist tag and quickly shook her head, saying, no. Ellie frowned as she didn't see anyone suspicious, nor did the waiter. But the bamboo forest will be so grand that it is impossible to shoot an empty gun. Seeing her frown, the waiter showed a look of fear and timidly said, if you don't believe it, then connect to my visual network. Ellie was a bit surprised. Allowing a stranger to access her private network was like giving her life. But currently the most important thing is to find the robber, there is no other way. Ellie is a bit anxious. Since the other party doesn't mind, what does she mind? Chapter 2. The Golden Robbery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Ellie gently placed her hand on the back of the waiter's neck. A tingling sensation spread throughout the body, stirring up the senses of smell and taste, followed by hearing and touch, and finally vision. The scene of the cute waitress in front of me was like being frantically 2D transformed, filtered by the corners of my eyes, and finally turned into a white light. Welcome to Chang'an Public Network. Difu. After the white light, Ellie saw a small bridge made of bluestone bricks, and below the bridge was a surging red river. On both sides of the small bridge, there are endless red petals. On the river, there are several large boats decorated with red lanterns, and waves of dancers singing come from the boats. What's going on here? Isn't it connected to the visual network of the server? How did you connect to the Chang'an Public Network? You've been fooled. Ellie quickly reacted and gritted her teeth, forcefully disconnecting the nerve connection. Exited from Chang'an Public Network. Difu. Goodbye. The scene in front of me suddenly changed, and after a burst of white light, my consciousness returned to my body. The waiter in front of me has disappeared, leaving only a waiter's uniform. Boom! As soon as Ellie adapted to the surrounding light and shadow, there was a loud noise coming from the rear of the train, causing it to jolt violently. However, it did not leave the track and instead came to a stop in the high altitude. The passengers screamed and made a mess. Oh no, it's too late. The first to fifth sections of the carriage are all passengers, and from the sixth section onwards it is golden. An electric arc swirled around Ellie's left leg, making a crackling sound as she shuttled through the crowded and panicked crowd like a cheetah. 17 seconds later, she moved from the first carriage to the rear of the fifth carriage. The girl I just saw with her bun head tied was leaning sideways, smiling at me. Ellie took a quick breath, her muscles tense all over her body, making a look of readiness as she searched for flaws in the other person's body and asked, "Are you a robber from the Bamboo Club?" The girl's body was relaxed and she looked fearless. She grinned and said, "I won't tell you, hee, I'll take these gold." After speaking, she opened the carriage door behind her with one hand, leaving it empty and the gold all over the carriage nowhere to be found. The girl snapped her fingers and playfully continued, "The last few carriages were also stolen. Do you want to know my name? My name is Xiao." The arc lingering on Ellie's left leg suddenly surged, and her leg movements were as fast as the wind, kicking her with just one kick. Bang! The door of the carriage was directly smashed by the kick, and the electric arc thunder connected Ellie's left leg into the air, then surged along the door to the entire carriage. But Xiao had already opened the small door on the right side of the nearby carriage and jumped off the train suspended in the air. Her voice came from afar. "Goodbye." Ellie looked down from the small door and could only see a small white parachute. At this moment, there was a commotion in the fourth carriage behind us, and more than 10 masked men in black clothes rushed in with shotguns. The strong man led by him saw the empty carriage behind him at a glance. With a face full of flesh, he directly pressed his shotgun against Ellie's chest. The strong man shouted angrily, "I am from the Bamboo Grove Society, a horse rider. Where is gold?" Ellie smiled with relief and was very happy. The wind constantly surging in outside the small door blew her short hair. "You really have enough to seek death." The arc flickered on her legs, and with just one foot, the thunderous force turned over 10 strong men across from her into charred corpses. Due to a major robbery on train K35, it arrived half an hour later than expected. It wasn't until 12:30 in the morning that I stopped on the platform of Chang'an City. The people on the platform have long been cleared, except for a chubby man wearing a yamen uniform and a group of people wearing yamen clothes waiting silently in the rain. However, they did not get caught in the rain, and there were more than 10 white small rain shelter machines on their heads. Seeing Ellie walking off the train, the chubby man eagerly welcomed her and reached out his hand, saying, "Are you Ellie from Dali Temple in the capital? Nice to meet you. I am Wang Yi, the constable of Chang'an Yamen." Ellie shook hands with him and said coldly, "Do you understand everything about the car?" Wang Yi nodded and said, "I understand. There was a thief named Xiao who stole gold, and you killed all the robbers in the Bamboo Forest Society, right?" During the conversation, several Yamen officials removed more than 10 completely charred corpses from the train. One of the Yamen runners said, "Report. There are a total of 17 corpses, all male, with the iconic tattoos of the Bamboo Grove Society on their bodies. The cause of death seems to have been struck by lightning." Ellie said calmly, "I killed her. As for the thief named Xiao, you should catch him as soon as possible. She has a Chang'an accent, and I estimate she is from Chang'an." Wang Yi's face was smiling, but due to his obesity, his eyes were too crowded to see when he smiled. He rubbed his hands and asked, "Let me confirm again. Xiao, a teenage girl, stole 10 carriages of gold alone and took it away smoothly under your eyes. Then you killed all the robbers in the Bamboo Forest Club, right?" Ellie furrowed her brow and spoke in a tone of dissatisfaction. What do you mean? Doubt me? She asked. Wang Yi quickly waved his hand and said, where and where? It's just that I can't make up my mind about this matter. I need to report it to the higher authorities. As for you, there are no witnesses, and no one can testify to you. I'm afraid we can only temporarily feel wronged. Ellie lifted her coat, took off the waist tag of the Grand Priest, and said, look carefully before you speak. Wang Yi glanced at his waist tag, then squinted his eyes as his obese body leaned closer and closer. After a while, his face became serious and he said, your waist tag seems to be fake, isn't it? Ellie's restless mood reached its peak at this moment. The train robbery case went wrong, and finding the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com was already enough to make her anxious. Now even this little constable is shouting at himself, questioning his identity. She whispered, I have been working at the Dali Temple for 8 years since I was 16 years old. Do you think the waist badge is fake or fake? Wang Yi's obese body bent down again and said with a low brow, wait a moment, I'll check. After speaking, a semi-transparent crystal board appeared in front of him and entered the internal network to search. As time passed, the originally bent waist gradually straightened out, and the flattering smile disappeared from the face. Finally, the crystal board disappeared, and Wang Yi's face was cold. He waved his hand and called a few Yamen officials forward, shouting loudly, this person is impersonating a public official of Dali Temple. Let's get him arrested first. Ellie raised her eyebrows, completely surprised that the other person would say that she was fake. How could it be? She instinctively took a step back, and the purple electric light on her left leg exploded. Wang Yi's small eyes couldn't help but show a cold and majestic expression, and he asked, why? Do you still want to resist arrest? The two Yamen runners behind him pulled out pistols from their waists. Ellie quickly calmed down. Wang Yi in front of him must have changed his face in turn because he couldn't find any information about himself on the internet. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to give him 100 courage. As for the replacement of the waist tag, it is possible that it was done by Xiao. Since she was able to steal 10 carriages of gold alone in her own eyes, it is not a problem to replace her waist tag when she connects to the Chang'an public network. Difu. It seems that the fruits in Chang'an City are very deep. Ellie took a deep breath, with a hint of smile on her face. She reached out her hand in cooperation and said, I dare not resist arrest. I'll just go with you. Chapter 3. Ghost Night Tour. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Ellie was shackled with electronic shackles and imprisoned in the Yamen dungeon in Chang'an City. The dungeon is filled with 30 square meters of single rooms, and the silver-gray walls are made of special materials, which not only detain prisoners but also isolate all information, prohibiting prisoners from connecting public and private networks in normal ways. In this era of big information, it is more suffocating than being physically imprisoned. There are only 2 chairs and 1 table in the single room, which seems to be used for interrogation. However, Wang Yi never intended to interrogate himself. Before entering the dungeon, Ellie remembered the time clearly, and now it was already late at night, with no possibility of interrogating herself. She closed her eyes and reached out to touch the back of her neck. Although it is not possible to access the public network in the normal way, since she can establish herself in Dali Temple, Ellie naturally has some trump cards. Most people are born with a chip embedded in the back of their neck that connects to the internet, but Ellie has 2. One is a universal template chip, and the other is a chip from the same origin as the NUY engine. This chip from the same origin as the NUY engine allows her to freely roam in any public or private network, with a different identity. This chip was present at birth and is also the source of lightning power for her left leg. So, she was so persistent in exploring the whereabouts of her sister and parents, as well as her own background, that she stepped into the quagmire of Chang'an City. Ellie leaned back in the chair, tilted her head back and closed her eyes, her nerves connected to the internet. Connected to Chang'an Public Network. Difu. Welcome, Yanluo. Ellie opened her eyes and saw a small bridge. Under the bridge was the flowing river, with big boats on the river and flowers on the other side of the shore. It's no different from the scene I saw last time. The only difference is that one's identity has changed. So much so that their appearance has changed. Everyone maintains their original appearance when accessing public networks. But Ellie was now dressed in black, with a large black hat covering her face, and her whole body was tightly covered. Her skin was covered in small blue snake scales, but it was just covered by her clothes. There are many things that are most important at this time, Chen Xiao, Zhulin Hui, as well as the lost gold and one's own identity. If possible, it's best to check Wang Yi's background again. With this thought in mind, Ellie lifted her foot and walked onto the small bridge in front of her. After passing by, there's nothing to do. Tears of lovers flow across the other shore. The song of the singer girl kept coming from the big boat on the river, and her voice became clearer and clearer. Halfway through, Ellie heard a slightly immature voice shouting, "Stop. Don't leave. You'll die." She instinctively stopped and saw a blue, slightly round little cat on the other side of the bridge speaking. Ellie asked, "Are you talking to me?" The blue kitten nodded and continued to shout, "How could you be on the bridge at this time? Oh, don't move, ghosts are wandering at night." After listening to the blue kitten's words, Ellie also realized something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, even late at night, public networks are always overcrowded. But now there is no one on the bridge except myself. With my own wit, I shouldn't have overlooked this point. After the blue kitten finished speaking, Ellie noticed that figures were gradually appearing around her. These figures are by no means normal people, but rather slender and tall, with no face or limbs, as if floating in mid-air. These slender figures are numerous and have reached a crowded level, stacked layer by layer. They were originally transparent, but soon became semi-transparent, and in the end, their bodies turned black. When the figures are transparent, they can pass through Ellie, but when they turn black, they seem to have a physical entity and collide with her body. Ellie could feel the bone-chilling chill on their bodies, making her body even colder. Quickly, the figures crowded the entire bridge and the banks on both sides. Due to the overcrowding, many figures were squeezed off the bridge and fell into the river without a trace. Ellie dared not move, even her breathing slowed down. The blue kitten continued to shout, "Hold on. These figures will soon be elevated to reality. Upgraded to reality." Ellie was puzzled, but in the end, she listened to the kitten's instructions and didn't move around. From her experience, these ghosts may be caused by some kind of data congestion causing chaos. If one moves recklessly, they will be affected by turbulence and their consciousness will be torn apart and rolled up to an unknown place. As the night journey of the 100 ghosts continued, Ellie felt herself getting colder and colder, with a thick layer of frost condensing on her body. At this point, the snake scales on the skin began to continuously heat up, retaining some warmth. If you die on the public network, then you will also die in reality. After being crowded for a long time, these figures stopped their movements and their bodies began to expand, like balloons. After expanding to a certain extent, they exploded, and out of their original bodies emerged evil spirits with fierce faces. Some of these evil spirits have scorched yellow skin, with hot oil dripping down from their skin. Some of them were covered in bright swords, with their bodies riddled with wounds and holes, and dark red blood splattered everywhere. There are also some evil spirits that seem normal, but their bodies are dry and constantly gnawing on other evil spirits around them. At this moment, it feels like a real underworld. Ellie stood among the ghosts, her snake scales scorching hot, and she faintly let out deep snake moans. The evil spirits who came towards her heard the snakes moan, and a frightened expression appeared on their faces, avoiding her. Although surrounded by 100 ghosts, no ghost dares to get close. Dong! With the sound of a vast bell in the depths of the underworld, the evil spirits roared one after another, their figures gradually faded and became semi-transparent. Finally, they became transparent and disappeared together. Ellie took a long breath, and the scorching snake scales on her body gradually cooled down. She shouted at the blue kitten by the bridge and asked, "Can we go now?" The blue kitten took a few more steps towards the bridge, lowered its head to smell it carefully, and then lifted its head and said, "All right, come down quickly." Ellie nodded and waited for another 5 minutes before taking a walk. The frost that had just solidified on her body has completely dissipated, transforming into snowflakes and disappearing. The blue kitten jumped onto the stone pier by the bridge, with a hint of mature emotion in its tone. "I have seen some lucky people bump into the 100 Ghosts Night Walk before, but you are still the first one to survive from inside." Chapter 4. Negotiation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The blue kitten jumped off the stone pier and spun around under Ellie's feet, twitching its nose a few times. A hint of shock appeared on the small cat's face. It seemed incredulous and needed to be confirmed multiple times before making 2 more turns. Finally, he jumped back onto the stone pier. Then she obediently lowered her head and her somewhat round body also crawled down. Yanluo. Ellie raised her eyebrows, and the other party actually knew her identity. Or, to put it another way, one can recognize this chip from the same origin as Yanluo. After thinking for a moment, she said, "Are you a virtual product?" The kitten didn't look up and still respectfully replied, "I am a branch of the information flow of Chang'an Public Network. Difu, created by the Yanluo engine to suppress virtual upgrades. However, I don't have a name yet, you can give me a name." Ellie can be considered relieved. One's identity as a Yanluo cannot be easily exposed. The entire public network is created by the Yanluo engine, rounded to the nearest hole, and the kitten in front of it can also be considered self-created. She nodded lightly at the kitten and said, "You can call it Xiao." Her words seemed to have a magical power, and as soon as she finished speaking, Xiaolan's hair stood up in waves, then returned to calmness within a second. It had a wonderful connection with Ellie. Names are magical. Even if a virtual creation is given a name, it will completely have its own identity, rather than just a piece of data code and information flow. Xiaolan said, "Thanks to Yanluo for giving her a name." Ellie continued, "What do you mean by being promoted just now?" "Since the creation of Chang'an Public Network. Difu, some strange things have happened. Every once in a while, virtual data streams come to reality through upgrades," said Xiaolan, sitting on a stone pier with a round and rolling body. Ellie asked, "What do you mean is that the 100 Ghosts Night Walk I just saw has been elevated to reality? Now, the 100 Ghosts Night Walk is happening in Chang'an City." Xiaolan nodded and replied, "That's right, it's just showing up in a different way. Currently, the upgrade situation of Chang'an Public Network Difu has not spread to other public networks. And I was created by Yanluo specifically to suppress the upgrade." Ellie patted her head lightly. She had never heard of such a thing before at the Dali Temple in the capital. "Since there has been a 100 Ghosts Night Walk in reality, I also need to quickly go and see what the situation is. Moreover, the virtual data flow in the public network of Chang'an City can be upgraded to reality, and with the control of Xiaolan, I now have some initiative." Xiaolan continued, "What instructions does Yanluo have?" Ellie immediately realized and pondered for a moment before saying, "I'm going to see what's going on. Can you help me check something?" Xiaolan bowed respectfully and said, "Please speak." Ellie continued, "I will open up my personal data to you. Can you help me check why my information is not available in the Dali Temple in the capital? Has it been deleted? Who deleted it? Also, Chen, Xiao and Wang Yi, check their tracks on the public network." Xiaolan replied, "I only have the permission to suppress upgrades in the Chang'an Public Network Difu, and not the permission to query. However, I will do my best. Ellie stepped forward and rubbed its cat head, the feeling of its fur as if it were real. She said, just do your best. If there's any news about the promotion, just let me know. After speaking, she disconnected the neural network connection. Yanluo, you have logged out of Chang'an Public Network. Difu. Goodbye. Ellie opened her eyes and the gray ceiling in her sight gradually became clear. Even if she no longer maintains a neural connection to the public network, she can still feel the continuous transmission of Xiaolan's data stream in the chip behind her neck. She comfortably adjusted her position on the chair and shouted, I want to see Wang Yi. I have something to say to him. After a while, seeing no one paying attention to her, Ellie shouted a few more times. She jumped onto the table and stomped on it, making a thumping sound. For a moment, the broadcast sounded in the room, and a yamen attendant cursed and said, stop riding horses and be like a crazy woman. Ellie continued to shout, I want to see Wang Yi. I want to see Wang Yi. Finally, there was a commotion as the radio rang out again. The boss is busy now, I don't have time to deal with you. Don't step on the table, I'll electrocute you again. Ellie crossed her waist with both hands and chuckled, saying, what I'm not afraid of the most is being electrocuted. Is Wang Yi busy dealing with the night trip of ghosts? If you ask him to come over, I'll help him solve it. The radio didn't speak, but there was a sizzling sound of electricity in the room. In an instant, a strong electric current spread throughout the room, but Ellie still smiled and stood motionless on the table. The electric current that spread throughout the room rushed wildly towards her, then was attracted and lingered on her left leg. This caused the arc on Ellie's left leg to surge and make a crackling sound. Ellie continued to shout, is that it? Turn up the electricity a bit more. Without a response from the radio, she went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and continued to make a big fuss. If it weren't for her short and messy hair, she would have looked like a crazy woman. In this closed room, it was unknown how long it had been until the tables had broken marks, and it was only then that Ellie collapsed into a chair and gasped for breath. Click. The door was pushed open, and Wang Yi, dressed in the uniform of a yamen runner, walked in with a gloomy expression and sat opposite her. Seeing the dust and cracks on the table, he frowned and asked in a tone that was not friendly, are you looking for me? Ellie smiled and adjusted her state. She crossed her legs recklessly and said, your face looks so ugly, haven't you solved the problem of wandering ghosts at night? The flesh on Wang Yi's face trembled for a moment, and his small eyes shone brightly. He stared at Ollie for a while before slowly speaking up. His voice was tinged with a hint of mockery. The news is quite clear, it seems that you are not a good character to play with. Ellie replied, how many years have I been working as a servant in Dali Temple for nothing? I can help you solve the problem of the 100 Ghosts Night Tour, but I have conditions. Wang Yi sneered twice and said, I don't think you have the qualifications to negotiate terms with me. If you pretend to be an official of the Dali Temple and don't directly shoot you, it's fine. Ellie shrugged nonchalantly and said, then you can shoot me. Don't you dare. If you catch me, do you dare to send a message to Dali Temple? Have you sent it? Upon hearing these words, Wang Yi's face changed and Ellie understood. If the waste tag is changed, even if the information from the internal network is cleared, it can still be restored. The cases handled by oneself in the Dali Temple are all stored in the archives, and no one can delete them. Judging from Wang Yi's performance, it is likely that he did not report the matter, but rather suppressed it. That's why I live to this day. Who is the mastermind behind oneself? Chapter 5. The Concretization of Ghost Night Walking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Wang Yi's face showed a thoughtful expression, and his gaze occasionally glanced at Ellie. Finally, he shook his head and said, no, thank you for keeping it closed here. When it's time to let you out, I'll definitely let you out. After speaking, he got up and was about to leave. Ellie shouted, "So what are you doing here to see me? Isn't it that the 100 Ghosts Night Walk can't handle it? Think carefully, is it the greater responsibility of letting me out, or the greater responsibility of not being able to handle the 100 Ghosts Night Walk?" Wang Yi stopped in his tracks, turned around, and stared fiercely at Ellie. "I'm a constable. Even a prisoner of yours came to command me. Be careful not to electrocute you." This time it was Ellie's turn to have a mocking smile on her face. "Whatever you want. But the 100 Ghosts Night Tour has been upgraded from the public network in Chang'an. If it continues to be unresolved and spreads to other cities or public networks, your head can't be saved by anyone." When a person gains weight, especially to the extent of Wang Yi, it is difficult to see an expression on their face. But at this moment, Ellie felt his anger and killing intent firsthand. After a moment of silence as the two gazed at each other, Wang Yi walked across from Ellie, pulled up a chair, and sat down again, asking, "What are your conditions?" Ellie snapped her fingers and said, "Whoever caused me to go to jail, I believe you have a way to get me out. Once you've taken care of the Ghost Night Tour, I'll also catch the female thief named Xiao." Wang Yi repeated the previous question, "What are your conditions?" Ellie spread her hands and said, "Of course you let me out, you pig head." Wang Yi was not provoked by Ellie's contemptuous insults. He stood up and seemed to have regained his composure. He said, "Tonight at 12 o'clock, the yamen is unguarded and the door is not locked. Just a reminder, Julin will think you have swallowed 10 carriages of gold from the K-35 train and are looking for you everywhere. If you are killed outside, it's not my business." After speaking, he gently walked out and closed the door. Wang Yi had just left, and Ellie immediately reached out to touch the back of her neck. Connected to Chang'an Public Network. Difu. Welcome, Nyua. On the shore by the Naiha Bridge, amidst the swaying red flowers on the other side, Ellie gently called out to Little Blue. The blue dots in the air gradually condensed and turned into a blue kitten crawling in front of Ellie. "Nyua, are you looking for me?" Alice asked, "How have you been with what I have instructed you?" Xiaolan's kitten shook its head and replied, "No message. I can't access other permissions on the public network." Ellie then went straight in and said, "I want to solve the problem of ghosts walking at night in reality. What's the solution?" "I don't know. I can only suppress the upgrading of the virtual network." "Nyua, please don't make things difficult for me." Xiaolan's little cat face furrowed up Ellie's side slightly and said, "Okay, I think so too. What time is it now?" Little Blue's wrinkled little cat face quickly returned to normal. At 21:52.46 in the evening. Ellie nodded and disconnected the link. Exited from Chang'an Public Network. Difu. Goodbye, Nyua. Ellie looked up and stared at the ceiling, whispering softly and quickly to herself, 5240.7, 5240.8, 5240.9. Ellie stood in front of the door, counting quickly in her mouth, staring intently at the doorknob. Her hand was only a millimeter away from the grip. 59 points 50.8. 59 minutes and 59. 12 o'clock. With a click, Ellie twisted the door handle to go out. There was no one in the corridor, only her thumping footsteps kept ringing. After leaving the yamen, the sky was still dark, and a light drizzle dripped down as if it had no weight. The towering buildings all around are stacked in layers, and the end cannot be seen for a moment. There are no lights on the street, but the neon lights on the tall buildings can already illuminate all the streets. At 12 o'clock, 100 ghosts walk at night. Countless figures seem both unreal and real, filling the streets, making the already narrow streets even more crowded. These figures emitted subtle cries, and the rain curtain could not conceal them. The sound of mechanical rotation kept ringing from the darkness of the street, mixed with the roar of vengeful souls and unwilling shouts, constantly reaching Ellie's ears. The purple arc flickered on Ellie's sitting legs, casting light and shadow on a small pool below her feet. These seemingly illusory or real figures are not aggressive, but they have become increasingly noisy from being quiet. The mechanical sound in the darkness rotates more clearly, and waves of click 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 sound keep coming out. At a certain moment, the mechanical sound stopped and the red mechanical light lit up in the darkness. The next moment, a metal blade full of killing intent rushed towards Ellie from the darkness. Bang! Ellie dodged in time, and the sharp blade sliced through the stone wall behind her, like a piece of tofu. After the metal blade, a humanoid machine emerged from the darkness. Its head is very narrow, with only one bright red eye above it. The whole body is covered in silver-white metal, overflowing with a delicate luster under the neon light. Without a hand, I found two sharp blades to replace the book garden www.xiaoxuiyuan.com. This robot is very tall, close to 4 meters, 2 Ellies are so tall. Ellie's legs flickered with lightning, and she flipped her hind hand to avoid the sharp blade, then kicked her up with a swift kick. Bang! Lightning collided with metal and kicked the robot into the wall. It was not affected at all and stood up again with its hands pressed against the wall. Ellie frowned and didn't give the other person any breathing time. She kicked her right leg onto the robot's leg and jumped up with the help of force. Her left leg kicked the robot's head askew. My neck turned 360 degrees in a circle. The metal shell at the neck was kicked off, exposing the wires inside. After a kick, Ellie lay her right hand on the robot's shoulder and punched the exposed wire with her left hand. When it's clattering. The wires were all broken, and the robot took 2 steps back and fell fiercely into the deep pit that had just been smashed. The red light in the eyes extinguished. Ellie landed steadily, clapping her hands and taking a long breath. But soon, the red light in the eyes of the robot flooded again, and the metal sharp blade on its hand struck in an instant. The sound of breaking the wind sliced the drizzle even finer. This attack caught Ellie off guard. Despite evading it in time, the skin on her arm was still cut to a huge opening, and blood flowed down the drain under the rain curtain. The robot supported the wall behind it and stood up again. The rain is getting heavier and heavier. The pain in her skin brought Ellie a majestic sense of war. She reached out and wiped the blood from the wound on her arm onto her face. I felt like my whole body was burning hot, and blood surged up my head. My hands are also starting to tingle. Are you one of the upgraded ghosts from 100 Ghosts Night Walk? It's a bit interesting. Chapter 6. Chen Zhao's Meeting Ceremony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the heavy rain poured down, and the only answer to Ellie was the sound of metal blades breaking through the wind. The wind was so loud that it almost chopped up the rain. Her figure flipped and moved agilely in the heavy rain, her left leg carrying lightning hitting the robot with a thumping sound. The blood stains applied to the face were washed away by the heavy rain, but it made the body boil even more. The hot blood inside the body, along with the cold rain, burned up. The robot in front of him was also hit and retreated in succession. Ellie found an opportunity to jump up with the help of the wall, riding on the shoulders of the robot, and then her legs suddenly exerted force. Bang! The robot's head was crushed by its legs and exploded. Countless fragments scraped through Ellie's skin. After the explosion, there was only a hole left in the neck. The robot's body also began to shake, taking 2 random steps left and right before falling and sitting on the ground. Ellie raised her fist high and slammed it into the hollow neck of the robot. Bang! 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 It wasn't until the entire upper body of the robot was dented and shattered by the impact that Ellie stopped her hand. She trembled slightly all over, panting heavily, and the intense feeling of blood just now had only slightly calmed down. My hands are covered in bloodstains. The battle ended, the tense muscles relaxed, and the focus dispersed from the robot. She heard of footsteps gradually approaching in the heavy rain. Subsequently, a pair of brown boots appeared in the remaining light of his sight. Ellie looked up and saw a girl with a ball-tied head in front of her. She was wearing a transparent raincoat and shorts. Underneath the raincoat is a white T-shirt painted with graffiti, and above the head is a small rainproof machine floating. Ellie had seen this woman before, the thief who stole 10 carriages of gold from K35. Chen Xiao. Chen Xiao had a smile on his face, and his right hand kept flipping a gold coin. He said in a relaxed tone, "You're still very strong, aren't you?" "I didn't see anyone wrong." Ellie sat on the ground, wiped the rain off her face, brushed her scattered hair behind her ear, and said, "I like someone like you who falls into the trap." Chen Xiao squatted down, his face full of confidence. "If I can run away the first time, I can run away the second time. You will always catch." Before she could finish speaking, Ellie bounced off the ground like a cheetah and instantly knocked her down. The small rain shelter machines floating above my head were knocked away. The pouring rain instantly fell on Chen Xiao's body, causing her body to tremble with the cold. She shouted, "It hurts, it hurts. Please be gentle." Ellie sat on her back, one hand holding her neck and the other twisting her arm. With a smile, he said, "What are you pretending to be? You're falling into a trap like this and you're looking for me for something." Chen Zhao's face struggled to move for a moment, and Yu Guang looked at Ellie with a chuckle and said, "You're really smart. Miss, I have something to do with you. I released that robot just now, take a look at its model." Ellie said, "I won't look, you can just say it." Chen Xiao swallowed his saliva and said, "This robot is a mechanical apostle from Chang'an Yamen, model new 2000, and a combat robot. It has been affected by the 100 Ghosts night travel." Ellie frowned and said, "New 2000. The new mechanical apostle produced by Chang'an itself." Chen Xiao nodded slightly and continued, "Think about it, 100 Ghosts night tour. Even the mechanical Yamen guards in the Yamen, oh no, mechanical apostles can influence it." Ellie exerted some force on her hand and impatiently asked, "What exactly are you trying to say?" Chen Xiao let out a painful hiss and immediately said, "You have been released. Do you want to solve the problem of the 100 Ghosts night walk?" "I can help you." Ellie asked again, "How can you help me?" Chen Xiao snorted, "You let me go, apologize to me again, and I'll tell you." Ellie placed it on her arm and gently rotated her head with both hands. With a threatening tone, she whispered, "I'm dating you here. If I don't say it, I'll die." Faced with the threat, Chen Xiaoxi was not afraid and said, "Then you can kill me. The 100 Ghosts night walk cannot solve it, and you don't want gold either." Ellie's hand grew a bit heavier, and Chen Xiao felt like her neck was about to be twisted. She quickly said, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I really want to solve the problem. I know the source of the 100 Ghosts night walk, and I can take you there." Ellie's hand stopped, she stood up and checked the model of the robot. As Chen Xiao said, he is the new 2000 mechanical apostle produced by Chang'an. Mechanical apostles are robots responsible for assisting in the operation of cities, equivalent to mechanical officials, provided separately by the core network of each city. In other words, the mechanical apostles are linked to private domain networks. And the 100 Ghosts night tour has been upgraded from the public network. It seems that this thing is like a virus, starting to spread between different networks. Chen Xiao stood up, moved his muscles and bones, muttered, "It hurts me so much, won't you take it lightly?" Ellie sighed slightly and turned to the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, asking, "What is the source of the 100 Ghosts night tour? Take me there." Chen Xiao rolled his eyes and said, "Now we have the conditions. You hit me again and want to go for free. How could there be such a good thing?" Ellie asked, "What conditions?" Chen Xiao's eyes lit up and he said, "Actually, it's not a harsh condition. On the contrary, I'll help you. Your name is Ellie, right?" Ellie nodded. She has been locked up in a cell since coming to Chang'an and just came out. This Chen Xiao doesn't know where he got his name from, so it seems he's not an unknown person either. Chen Xiao continued, the constable in the Yamen, Wang Yi, has been running a smuggling business. Can you do me a favor and investigate his future activities? Ellie didn't immediately agree, but asked, what exactly is your identity? A thief, can you still know that a constable smuggles? Chen Xiao put his hands behind his back and said, you will know who I am in the future, but I cannot tell you now. To be precise, when you defeat Wang Yi, you will know who I am. Ellie sighed slightly and said, I don't like riddles, and I believe others don't either. If you keep being a riddle, you will be scolded. Chen Xiaohe chuckled and said, don't worry, no one dares to scold me in front of me. There is a warehouse in Chang'an Westport, and I will send you the coordinates. The password is 2000, and there are 2 carriages of gold inside. Let's treat it as a gift for you. After all, we have met twice. Immediately after, Ellie received the coordinates sent by Chen Xiao. She saved the coordinates and said, all right, the source of the 100 Ghosts night journey, take me there. Chen Xiao took out another rain shelter machine from somewhere and said, come with me. Chapter 7. Guimen Pass, Yanluo Hall. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Chen Xiao pulled out a floating motorcycle from the corner of the alley and rode it in front of Ellie. He raised his head and said, get in the car, I'll take you there. This floating motorcycle has a streamlined body, which looks smooth and exquisite. Ellie asked, isn't this motorcycle cheap? Chen Xiao said, it's just a small sum of money. Get on the car quickly. Ellie flipped over and got into the car, sitting in the back seat wearing a helmet. Chen Xiao's voice came clearly from inside his helmet. Sit down, I'm riding very fast. After speaking, she twisted the handle and the floating motorcycle rushed out, flying in mid-air and shuttling through the tall buildings. The speed was very fast, accompanied by the heavy rain and the neon lights in the tall buildings becoming blurred. Chen Xiao was right. She rode very fast, ignoring traffic rules and rushing, even spaceships and flying vehicles did not give way. Ellie thinks that Chen Xiao can only ride at noon and something will happen sooner or later. However, judging from her proficient skills, Ellie is not in the mood to worry about anything. I tried to connect to the network of the Beijing Dali Temple on the back seat, but unfortunately, I couldn't connect. When she came out of the Chang'an Yamen before, she tried to contact people from Dali Temple and found that she couldn't even access the internal network of Dali Temple. Others are completely unreachable. It indicates that there are also people playing tricks in the capital. If we go back now, it may be even more dangerous. Although I have come out of the Yamen prison now, in the end, I still have an illegal identity. It was Wang Yi who released himself, with the goal of solving the problem of wandering ghosts at night. The 100 Ghosts Night Tour and the Golden Robbery all involve Chen Xiao, but his identity doesn't seem simple either. Ellie shook her head and stopped thinking about these things. Let's solve the current situation first. Chen Xiao's voice came out from his helmet. Are you feeling a headache now? Have you found that things are more complicated than you imagine? Ellie replied, tell me about the origin of the 100 Ghosts Night Tour. Chen Xiao said, since the 100 Ghosts Night Walk has been upgraded from public networks to reality, there are naturally traces to follow. There is a ghost gate in Chang'an City. When the ghost gate is opened, the 100 Ghosts Night Walk will affect the machinery of the entire city, making them wander like ghosts and have a great tendency to attack creatures. Ellie sat in the back seat, looking down, and could see several flames. It seems that someone has been attacked. She asked, so, as long as we close the ghost gate, we can stop the 100 ghosts from going on a night trip. How did the several hundred ghosts night trips that occurred in Chang'an before be resolved? Chen Xiao was somewhat surprised and said, do you still know what happened before? The previous 100 Ghosts Night Walk has been upgraded to reality with a time effect. It disappeared before it spread to public networks in other cities. Ellie continued, do you mean that the previous few times were all waiting for the 100 Ghosts night tour to end on its own? As Xiao spoke, he drove his hovering motorcycle constantly shuttling between tall buildings. That's right, about a week. But this time it's different. This time it's particularly powerful, and it's already attacking the firewalls of other cities on a large scale. By the way, the Ghost Gate can't be closed. Ellie asked, so why are you taking me over there? Just finished asking, the floating motorcycle landed smoothly. Xiao took off his helmet and said, I promise to help you, not to help you solve it. Anyway, it's just this Ghost Gate. If you can solve it, you must start from here. The rain has eased a bit, and Ellie looks around to see the situation. This is the center of Chang'an, with many machines possessed by resentful ghosts wandering on the streets, but the two of them have not yet caught their attention. Because it is the city center, the streets are very spacious and tidy. Even though there are many tall buildings, they do not seem crowded, and there are even no homeless people. An empty street, with only rain falling quietly. Xiao pointed to a building in the center of the street and said, here, the Ghost Gate is inside. You can go in and find it yourself. I won't go in with you. This is a brightly lit building, and on the street, you can vaguely see the pristine white heavenly lobby inside. Surprisingly, the front hall door is still made of glass material. Ellie got off the hovering motorcycle, took off her helmet and handed it to Xiao, saying, the crime of stealing 10 carriages of gold cannot be shirked, but we can temporarily cooperate now. Xiao shook his helmet and smiled playfully, saying, no one in Chang'an City can cure me yet. Goodbye. After speaking, he twisted the handle of the car and left. The streets are once again empty. Besides neon, rain, ghosts, and Ellie. We have established a private domain link with Xiao lightly tapping her earlobe and turning off the message prompt. Ellie's agile figure dodged all the robots and arrived at the glass door of the building. The glass door is an induction door, and when it detects her, it opens directly. As soon as she stepped into the hall, there was a tingling sensation behind Ellie's neck, followed by waves of spinning and turning, blurring her perspective. Yanluo, welcome to connect to the private domain network of Chang'an. Yanluo Temple. Open your eyes again, and in front of you is a tall palace, with a completely black body that emits a cold and gloomy aura. This palace is as high as 70 or 80 meters, which can be considered as blocking the sky and sun. In addition to its yin and cold aura, it also reveals its majesty. Zhaoshuyuan.com. The sky is even more blood red, making the Yanluo Temple even more terrifying. Yanluo Hall, judging life and death. As soon as Ellie calmed down and rubbed her eyebrows, she heard a majestic voice coming from inside the hall. Who is outside the hall? Subsequently, two tall figures dressed in judges' clothes walked out of the hall, with a slender figure on the left, a white horse face. The figure on the right is sturdy and looks like a bull's head. The expression on Nyo Tu Ma's face was ferocious, 100 times colder than the ghosts on the Naiha Bridge. These two judges between life and death, just a glance can make people feel cold. They held heavy shackles and walked up to Ellie's side, directly handcuffing them. Click. Ellie felt her strength disappear and she could no longer exert any strength. Subsequently, they held Ellie one by one and directly carried her to the hall. Within the main hall, majestic formations were revealed everywhere, and countless souls were suppressed into stone bricks laid out inside the hall. As soon as Ellie was framed, these souls let out piercing and mournful screams, shaking the heart and piercing the eardrums. At the forefront of the main hall, there is a huge judge's table. Ellie estimates it to be at least 50 or 60 meters tall. Behind the judge's table, there sits a person of the same size, dressed in official clothes and wearing a black hat. But the hall was too dark to see the face of this giant. The giant spoke up, "Who is kneeling, your highness? Give your name." The snake scales on Ellie's skin emitted warm waves, and she broke free from the hands of Nyo Tu Ma Mian and shouted, "Who is in the palace? Give me your name." Bold. Bang. The huge startled wood on the judge's table made a deafening sound, and the entire hall felt like an earthquake. Nyo Tu Ma Mian stood unsteadily and knelt beside Ellie. Chapter 8. Tongue-Pulling Hell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, as the startled tree fell, not only the judge's table, but also the entire hall shook. The souls in the stone bricks covering the main hall screamed together, and countless evil spirits murmured and rushed towards her, as if they were about to pierce through Ellie's eardrums. Even the thoughts in her brain stopped for an instant, and her head turned into a paste. She couldn't bear the noise and shouted, "It's so noisy. Please be quiet." As soon as the words fell, the screams that penetrated deep into the soul came to an abrupt end. The entire Yanluo hall instantly regained peace. There was a hint of surprise in the eyes of the ox-headed horse beside her, but she dared not get up and still crawled on the ground, waiting for Yanluo to speak. Arion looked up at the huge figure behind the judge's table and said, "Just because you want to try me. What crime have I committed?" The huge figure leaned forward slightly, although it was just a simple movement, it was like a mountain moving. The atmosphere of the entire Yanluo temple has become even more profound. The power of the King of Hell has silenced all ghosts and made them submit. The King of Hell leaned forward, but Ellie still couldn't see his face clearly. However, she could see his blue eyes, which carried the aura of sweeping everything and commanding all ghosts. Above the eyes, there is also a small crescent mark, which is somewhat incomplete. It can be considered the brightest thing in the entire Yanluo temple. Ellie guessed that the crescent mark should be on the forehead of the King of Hell. The King of Yen spoke in a thunderous voice, "Since he is innocent, why did he step into the Yanluo hall?" Alice was not intimidated by the aura in front of her, and sneered, "If stepping into the Yanluo palace is guilty, then you, and this ox-headed horse face, are you all guilty?" Upon hearing Ellie's words, the King of Hell was not angry. Instead, he let out loud laughter, like the sound of a bell, spreading throughout the entire hall of hell. The King of Yen said, "You are quite interesting, my daughter. I have been in charge of the Yanluo hall for over 10,000 years, and have always been impartial. I have never dealt with a wrongful case. My daughter, please explain in detail. Since you are innocent, why did you step into my Yanluo hall?" Seeing that the other party was still reasonable, Ellie's attitude softened a bit and said, "The wandering of ghosts at night has caused great harm to human life. As a Yanluo, you don't care about it." Before the King of Hell could speak, the horse beside Ellie shouted first, "Dare. Even in front of the Yanluo case, dare to cause trouble. The night travel of ghosts is fate and a natural law. Can you, as a little girl, guide us?" Ellie was wearing heavy shackles on her hands, but she still stood up and kicked the horse in front of her, flipping it over and tumbling on the ground several times. She said, "Shut up, you. Do you have the right to speak?" Later, she turned her head to look at the King of Hell and continued, "What about you? Don't you care?" After a moment of silence, the King of Yen replied, "What Ma Mian said is not entirely wrong. The night journey of the 100 ghosts is fate and a natural law. Even as a Yanluo, I have no authority over it." Ellie snorted twice and said, "So it seems that you're not much different from this horse noodle." Ma Mian prostrated herself on the ground and shouted, "Your Majesty. This woman is extremely arrogant. If she offends below, she will contradict the official. My subordinate suggests that she be thrown into the hell of tongue-pulling, and I will discipline her well." The King of Hell's eyes fixed on the horse's face, and then turned to Ellie. There was neither anger nor pity in his gaze, but it was calm like a stagnant pool of water. But there seems to be something else in this stagnant water, but Ellie hasn't noticed it yet. He slowly spoke up and said, "Prisoner Ellie, although I miss you all for goodness, you are about to commit a heavy crime of killing. The weight of killing is so great that even I cannot forgive you. Bull's head, horse's face. Niu Tu Ma Mian replied, I am here. The king of hell continued, immediately send her to the Sword Mountain Hell and send 100,000 Yin soldiers to guard her. Ma Mian quickly got up and, together with Niu Tu, grabbed Ali and escorted her outside the hall. Ellie kept looking into the eyes of the king of hell, finally realizing what other thing was in his eyes. The 100 Ghosts Night Walk has been upgraded to reality. He can't manage it, but he can manage it himself. Ellie's brain was spinning wildly, pondering on what the king of hell had just said. I am about to commit a heavy crime of killing 100,000 Yin soldiers, 100,000 Yin soldiers. Ellie was escorted out of the Yanluo hall by a bull's head and horse's face, heading towards a secluded road. This is a downhill road, and the further down, the higher the temperature, the hotter it becomes. Not long after walking, the two sides of the road became suspended, and the earth turned into layers of boiling magma, occasionally making a crackling sound. This downhill road stands in this vast sea of magma, and if you're not careful, you'll fall off. These magma have a very good color, emitting a bright red and yellow glow, reflecting on the face of Niu Tu Ma Mian. Their already ugly and ferocious faces were photographed with even more ferocity. Ma Mian chuckled inwardly and said, Hee hee, you woman, dare to rush into the adult world. Now that the tongue-pulling hell is not enough, we will send you to the Sword Mountain Hell. It's really tough now. The dull voice of Niu Tu came. Ma Mian, speak less. Ellie looked at Ma Mian and said with a smile, listen to your brother Nyoto, speak less. Otherwise, I'll take your life next time I come to the underworld. Ma Mian laughed, his laughter was very strange, it was a kind of giggling sound. He said, prisoner, you're quite good at fantasizing. Have you seen that at the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com? It's the first level of hell, the tongue-pulling hell. Ali looked in the direction of Ma Mian's fingers and saw that the magma on both sides of the road disappeared at some point, replaced by a blazing execution ground. This huge execution ground is black soil, with countless shirtless individuals bound in their hands and kneeling in front of torture tools. Behind each torture device, there is a demon dressed in a judge, holding a huge, dark pair of pliers and reaching into the prisoner's mouth. Because he lost his tongue, the entire execution ground was filled with strange cries. Ma Mian looked at Ellie and noticed that there was no expression of fear on the woman's face. He couldn't help but say, these prisoners in tongue-pulling hell, after their tongues are pulled out, they don't need to grow again for a moment, and then their tongues are pulled out again. They are so endless that they can't survive or die. They endure the temperature of purgatory every day and the pain of tongue pulling. Ellie smiled brightly and said, it doesn't sound very painful either. Ma Mian became angry and gasped for breath. He let out a few hoarse barks and roared, pulling out your tongue is not about pulling it out in one go, but slowly elongating it until it reaches the level of a long-tongued ghost. It makes you feel scared and constantly torments you. Ellie looked at him, raised her eyebrows, and casually stirred her tongue a few times. Then she smiled and said, that's it. And I don't have to get my tongue pulled out. Ma Mian was completely angered. He has been in the industry for thousands of years and has never seen such an arrogant person before. I've never seen such an arrogant ghost before. He grabbed Ellie's collar and his horse's nose spewed white air due to excessive anger. His huge horse eyes glared at Ellie like copper bells and said viciously, you're going to Sword Mountain Hell, which is even more painful than tongue-pulling hell. It's 100 times more painful. 100 times more painful. Chapter 9. 100,000 Yin Soldiers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Ellie tilted her head in disgust and frowned, saying, your big horse face is really uglier when you get closer. Just speak carefully. Ma Mian now wants to punch Ellie hard, but unfortunately not. He could only do his best to calm his emotions and say, now that you have a hard mouth, when you enter the hell of the Sword Mountain, you will have a good time. After finishing speaking, he and the cow head carried Ellie through the tongue pulling hell together. Blade Mountain Hell is on the 7th level, and tongue pulling hell is on the 1st level. Nyo Tu Ma Mian led Ollie through several layers of hell in the middle, all of which were howling everywhere, and most of the prisoners had no human form left. The road has always been downward, connecting layers of hell is an endless and scorching sea of magma, and no one can escape. Hell is despairing, endless, without light, without rest, and the days of punishment seem endless. Before reaching the hell of Sword Mountain, Nyo Tu stopped and said to Ma Mian, "Go back and report to the king, please mobilize 100,000 Yin soldiers to enter the hell of Sword Mountain, and then we will enter." Ma Mian gave Ellie a fierce glare before nodding back. After watching him walk away, Nyoto leaned up and whispered, "The king didn't say how long you needed to be punished, and he mobilized 100,000 Yin soldiers. Do you know the meaning behind it?" Ellie nodded and said, "I understand." Nyo Tu continued, "Climb the Sword Mountain, and I will open the door for you. At that time, 100,000 Yin soldiers will also be at your disposal. However, there is one more thing." Ellie looked serious and said, "You tell me." Nyo Tu continued, "How can 100,000 Yin soldiers go to the mortal world to fight against 100 ghosts? You need to think of a way." Ellie chuckled and said, "Give me some time, I'll solve this problem." Nyo Tu glanced back and said, "Hurry up while Ma Mian hasn't come back." Ellie squatted down and lightly patted her hand, shouting, little blue, come out quickly." Countless blue light dots gathered in front of her, eventually turning into a little cat. Xiaolan said, "Nuwa, what are your orders?" Upon hearing the word Nuwa and seeing the snake scales behind Ellie's neck, the cow's head's gaze flickered with strange colors, but remained silent. Ellie asked Xiaolan, "Are you responsible for suppressing the upgrade of virtual networks?" Xiaolan nodded. Ellie continued, "I'm going to send 100,000 Yin soldiers to reality later. Do you have any way?" Xiaolan immediately replied, "No problem. Upgrading from virtual to real is within my scope of authority." Ellie smiled and rubbed Little Blue's cat head, saying, "It's up to you this time. Go ahead." Xiaolan meowed and then turned into little blue light and disappeared. As soon as Ellie stood up, she saw countless blue semi-transparent giant ghosts floating above the magma sea with waves of killing intent, breaking into the hell of Blade Mountain. Each of these blue semi-transparent ghosts is extremely huge, standing at a height of 80.90 meters, wearing armor, with a serious expression and a strong killing intent on their bodies. These ghosts of 100,000 Yin soldiers, with the momentum of thousands of troops and horses, form different battle formations rushing forward with unwavering determination and momentum. No matter who is their opponent, the invading enemy will be mercilessly annihilated. Magnificent momentum, with a chilling killing intent. Like a sword that created heaven and earth. For a victorious teacher in every battle. 100,000 Yin soldiers spent half an hour galloping on the magma sea before all of them entered the hell of Sword Mountain. Ma Mian also returned to the side of Nyoto and Ellie and said, "Let's go." Without any extra words, Ellie was taken into the hell of Blade Mountain. Sword Mountain Hell, as its name suggests, is a mountain range that cannot be seen from the top when looking up, consisting entirely of dazzling swords, covered in scattered blood and flesh. Countless people climbed up naked, but all fell down. No matter how many knife wounds or piercing with a sharp sword, one will not die, only feel pain. Then, climb upwards and repeat the process. The 100,000 Yin soldiers who entered the hell of the Blade Mountain were all tall, surrounded by the Blade Mountain, staring intently and emitting a killing intent. In the whole hell, there were only endless screams. Being scratched or pierced by a sword does not make one feel accustomed or numb, and every pain is fresh. As far as Alice could see, it was a mournful scene. Ma Mian pushed her forward and said with a grim smile, "You can enjoy it here." Nyoto cast a meaningful gaze. Subsequently, the two of them left together. Bang! The gate of Sword Mountain Hell was closed, and Ellie also began to climb. She took off her coat and shoes and walked step by step towards the top of the knife mountain. Countless swords scraped every inch of her body, and soon, her whole body was covered in blood. Climbing for a while longer, he turned into a bloody person without even any good skin or flesh on his body. Pain. This is Ellie's first feeling, and the only feeling she can feel now. No matter how long you have been tormented, this pain will not make you numb. Countless swords and knives are densely packed, and every inch of her body has not been spared when searching for the book garden www.xiaosuiyuan.com. Cut and pierced by a knife. The body of this Dao mountain is very different from ordinary mountains, almost at a right angle of 90 degrees. Ellie climbed upwards, only able to fully press her body against the dense knives, allowing them to pierce her body. She then reached out and grabbed the knife above, then used force to move her body upwards. This is a path full of swords, and even more so, a path of blood. Wherever Ellie climbed, she left a long blood stain. She felt the blood in her body boiling, cooling, and constantly gushing out. Countless swords pierced through her body time and time again, causing her internal organs to jump and fall, and her intestines to stretch and break with a click. Subsequently, these internal organs grew again and experienced the pain of puncture. The skin is also cut and healed one by one, continuous and continuous. Dao Shan is very high, so high that you can't see the end at a glance. Ellie climbed very slowly, only a few hours before she could move a few centimeters. 100,000 Yin soldiers silently watched her, their killing intent turned into a drum of encouragement, and the sound echoed in Ellie's heart, rippling in the underworld of Dao Mountain. At first, Ellie had people who were also being punished together, but at some point, these people disappeared. Because she climbed too high. No other prisoner has ever been able to climb so high. This caught the attention of the people of the entire Sword Mountain Hell, who looked at Ellie and felt a slight tremble in their numb hearts. Then we continued to climb. The palpitating heart became numb again when pierced by the sword. Ellie was experiencing the pain brought by this Sword Mountain Hell with all her heart and soul, and her heart was filled with anger. Whether it's Dao Mountain or Fire Sea, I'll show you today. Chapter 10. The Transit of Yin Soldiers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the feeling of being cut alive by a knife is not good, let alone more than one knife. The most essential thing in this Dao mountain is the knife. Every minute and every second here, one must endure the feeling of being cut alive by millions of knives. It involves finally cutting open the skin, removing all the bones, meat, and internal organs inside, and then chopping them into small pieces. So it goes back and forth, until the nerves are also immersed in this feeling, like the brain is stabbed by millions of needles. No one can bear this feeling, and the others who were punished in the Sword Mountain Hell cannot bear it, and Ellie cannot bear it either. However, Ellie held her breath in her heart. No matter what the hell on the 18th floor of the Hell Hall, if she wants to leave, no one can stay. In reality, this is still the case in this Sword Mountain Hell. Even if you can't bear the torment of all these swords, you must endure it forcefully. If others cannot climb to the top of this knife mountain, she will come and climb to the top of this knife mountain. In just 1 hour, one can only climb up a few centimeters, with bones and flesh inside the body, and bursts of blood gushing out. Ellie has now entered a state of selflessness and concentration, unable to focus on anything else. Her concept of time has long been blurred, and she feels like she has been climbing for hundreds of years. Under endless torture, I finally saw the top of the Sword Mountain. At this moment, an inexhaustible force suddenly surged out of the body, and the climbing speed accelerated. The top of the Dao mountain is filled with swords and knives. Ellie's feet were stepping on the gap between these swords. At this moment, she had no good skin or flesh all over, and was completely a bloody person. Apart from a pair of eyes, they are also bright, shining with a stubborn light. She looked at the huge Yin soldiers surrounding the sword mountain. These huge Yin soldiers also looked at her. Ellie casually pulled out a knife from the side, and an emerald green light immediately lingered on the blade. Then, he raised his knife high above his head and spoke as if there were 1,000 needles stuck in his throat. She shouted, 100,000 Yin soldiers, listen to my orders. In an instant, the aura of all the Yin soldiers shook, and a sense of solemnity swept across the entire sword mountain. Countless dazzling swords trembled continuously, emitting buzzing sounds. The spirit of war is like a song, like beating drums, with the sound of waves ringing and stirring endlessly. A ray of sunset appeared in the sky, like blood, reflecting the entire sword mountain in hell like a battlefield of corpses and blood. Ellie felt the power in her body constantly flowing into the knife in her hand. As she swung her arm downwards, the entire dark red sky was torn apart wherever the blade passed. After the buzzing of swords and knives, they all shattered, and the crackling sound echoed in hell like a torrent. Finally, Daoshan collapsed with a loud bang, and the sky and earth lost their color. Exited from Chang'an Private Domain Network. Yanluo Palace. Goodbye, Nyua. Ellie opened her eyes in the bright and clean hall, and saw countless pairs of eyes overflowing with red light staring at her behind the glass door. Under each pair of eyes, there is a cold mechanical body. They stood quietly behind the glass door, motionless. Ellie moved her muscles and bones for a while, and after staying in the hell of Blade Mountain for a long time, she didn't feel like being cut by the knife. It was a bit uncomfortable for a while, but it was quite comfortable. The knife with a green glow was also brought out, located at the other end of the hall. There is a printer next to the knife. It must have been when I disconnected my mental connection that the printer printed it from my own hand. There must be 100,000 Yin soldiers sealed inside. With Xiaolan's help, I should be able to directly elevate 100,000 Yin soldiers to reality. After quickly pondering all of this, Ellie walked over and picked up the back of the knife, then looked at the robot people outside the glass door. As she walked towards the glass door, a purple arc began to linger on her left leg, and she smiled and said, "It's because of you ghosts that I've been cut alive for so long. It's hard for me to swallow this anger." Kaka kaka. With Ellie's footsteps, the robots also moved, their bodies twisted into various strange shapes, emitting sounds of metal friction and joint twisting and breaking. As if being possessed by a demon. At the next moment, these robots smashed the glass with various twisted postures and rushed in. The arc on Ellie's left leg surged and instantly filled the entire hall. In an instant, there was a power outage in the hall, and the robots and Ellie who were possessed by the evil spirits were plunged into darkness. The power outage quickly spread, and the entire neighborhood's power supply was paralyzed, pitch black. Subsequently, a strong purple lightning bolt that was about to blind people's eyes surged, becoming the only bright spot on this street. Boom! After a loud bang, the entire street was restored to electricity. The hall where Ellie was located was no longer bright and tidy, but was kicked out of a huge pit. The robots that possessed those evil spirits just now turned into a pile of scrap metal, haphazardly piled up in the pit. A burnt and rusty smell permeated the air. Ellie walked out of the building and took a deep breath of fresh air. It was great, there was only light rain now. After the power supply was restored, more and more machinery rushed towards this block. Not only combat robots, but also many household robots, dogs, and even refrigerators. These machines were plunged into a frenzy, running wildly on the streets, forming a torrent of steel constantly moving towards Ellie's direction. Any person or thing that obstructs them will be easily crushed. Chang'an City is very large, and a torrent of steel composed of a large army of machinery rushes in from all directions. The mournful screams of the soul spread throughout the city. At this moment, it is the true opening of the Ghost Gate and the night travel of ghosts. At this moment, the vast streets of Chang'an are completely occupied by machinery, and there is no one outside the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Ellie drew her long sword from behind, raised it high, and shouted, 100,000 Yin soldiers, listen to my command. We have left the spring terrace, and we will immediately slay 100 ghosts. The murderous aura spread from around her, and the neon-filled high-rise city of Chang'an seemed to have turned into an ancient battlefield. The incessant sound of drums spread out. Subsequently, towering Yin soldiers appeared one by one, forming a battle formation. Charge towards all directions with Ellie as the center. In an instant, a force of thousands of soldiers and horses swept across the entire city of Chang'an. The Yin army passes through and everywhere they go, they bow down and pay homage. Especially the steel flood that was possessed on various streets, those evil spirits screamed and fled in agony. These 100,000 Yin soldiers, with a crushing force, dispelled thousands of ghosts and restored the machinery to normal. Still in place, completely down. At this moment, in addition to the roar of fighting on the battlefield, there were also the screams of countless ghosts. Countless towering blue semi-transparent Yin soldiers filled the entire Chang'an city, and after suppressing the 100 ghosts, they disappeared. The knife in Ellie's hand also lost its emerald light, quickly decayed, and finally turned into ashes scattered on the ground. The matter of the 100 Ghosts night tour has been resolved. She shook her wrist, let go of her mouth, looked around, and it was incredibly quiet, with only a light rain drifting in the air. Lightly tapped the earlobe to open up the message channel. 2 of the messages were eye-catching. The first one was sent by Xiao. I have taken care of your identity. Rest assured and bring down Wang Yi. The second message is from the superior of Dali Temple. If there is any change in the capital, please do not return. We have arranged for you to become the official of Chang'an City and thoroughly investigate the Constable Wang Yi. Do not contact until you receive the next notice. Good wishes.